You think pirates were just rough warriors who slashed their way through life with cannons. But there's one skill that saved more lives than sword fighting. And it's probably the last thing you'd expect from these fearsome sea raiders. Sewing head, the ability to thread a needle and make precise stitches. This delicate skill could mean the difference between legendary treasure hunts and becoming fish food at the bottom of the ocean. Most people imagine that when pirate sails got torn, crews just slapped on quick patches and hoped for the best. But that's completely wrong. A ripped sail in the middle of nowhere wasn't just an inconvenience. It was basically a death sentence floating on wooden planks. The smartest pirates developed sewing techniques that were more advanced and life-saving than most people today could ever imagine. These weren't casual repairs done by clumsy hands. They were precision survival operations performed by men whose lives literally hung by threads. Those massive pieces of canvas weren't just decorative additions to make ships look pretty. They were the engines that kept pirates alive. Sails provided the power to move, escape dangers, and navigate across endless ocean waters towards safety and treasure. Without functioning sails, even the most fearsome pirate ship became nothing more than a floating coffin waiting for death. Picture this nightmare scenario. You're hundreds of miles from land when your main sail suddenly tears during a storm or battle.
Within minutes, your ship loses the power to move forward, steer properly, or escape from whatever threatens you.
You're completely at the mercy of ocean currents that might push you further from safety or toward enemy vessels. The physics of sailing meant that damaged sails created a domino effect of disasters that cascaded through every ship system. Ships without proper sail power couldn't maintain speed, which meant they couldn't generate enough wind flow over their rudders. Pirates would watch helplessly as their vessels drift sideways, spun in circles, or got pushed backward by waves and wind. Imagine being in a car that suddenly lost its engine, brakes, and steering, all at the same time. Except you're surrounded by water instead of roads, with no rescue service coming to help you. Enemy ships that spotted a vessel with torn sails knew they'd found easy prey floating helplessly on the water. Pirates with damaged canvas became sitting ducks for naval patrols, rival crews, or anyone else wanting to attack.
The irony was brutal. These feared raiders who struck terror struck.
All because of ripped fabric flapping uselessly in the wind, mocking their helplessness with every torn flutter.
But the danger didn't end with enemy attacks. Ships that couldn't sail properly were doomed to drift aimlessly, until their food and water supplies ran out, and crews would slowly starve to death while staring at broken sails. Stories spread through every port about ghost ships found months later, their crews reduced to skeletons, still clutching needles and thread, having died trying to repair their only hope of survival against impossible odds. The psychological terror was almost worse than the physical danger of starvation and thirst.
Pirates were men of action who solved problems through violence and cunning, not patient needlework.
Being trapped on a powerless ship while death approached slowly drove even the toughest sailors to desperation and madness. Some crews resorted to cannibalism when repairs failed and starvation set in among the helpless survivors. Others threw themselves overboard rather than face slow death by thirst and hunger while watching useless sails. But when storms hit and sails needed emergency repairs, the nightmare reached levels that would break most minds. Imagine trying to sew massive pieces of hairy, wet canvas while your ship pitches and rolls in towering waves. Pirates had to climb up swaying masts and rigging while being pelted by rain, hail, and flying debris. Then somehow thread needles and make precise stitches with hands that were frozen, bleeding, and shaking from exhaustion. The working conditions were absolutely hellish, like trying to perform surgery during an earthquake. Winds would grab partially repaired sails and whip them around like giant flags, trying to knock workers overboard. Pirates attempting repairs had to dodge flying canvas, metal fittings, and pieces of rigging that could crack skulls.
Meanwhile, they're trying to perform delicate needlework that required steady hands and careful attention to detail.
Some of the most experienced sailors fell to their deaths during emergency sail repairs in storm conditions. These weren't clumsy beginners. They were seasoned pirates who'd survived years of dangerous voyages at sea. But trying to sew torn canvas while hanging from ropes in hurricane-force winds proved too much even for experts. Crews would watch helplessly as their best seamsters lost their grip and plummeted into churning seas below. The ocean swallowed them instantly, leaving no chance for rescue in the violent storm conditions. Others were swept overboard by massive waves that crashed over the deck while they worked frantically. Pirates would be focused on threading a needle when walls of water would slam into them without warning.
Ripping them away from their safety lines and carrying them into the darkness of the angry sea.
Their shipmates could hear their screams for help, but rescue was impossible in storm conditions. That made survival a minute-by-minute struggle against forces that wanted to kill everyone aboard.
The cruel irony was that sailors who died during sail repairs were often trying to save everyone else. Their sacrifice bought the crew precious time and hope, but the cost was brutal and heartbreaking.
Ships that lost their best sewing specialists during storms faced even worse odds of completing successful repairs.
Before disaster struck and claimed the lives of everyone remaining aboard the doomed vessel.
What made these death-defying repair attempts even more challenging was that pirates needed specialized tools.
You couldn't fix massive ship sails with the tiny needles and delicate thread used for clothing repairs.
Pirates required an arsenal of heavy-duty sewing tools that they guarded as carefully as their weapons and treasure. Sailmaker needles were massive compared to normal sewing needles. Some were longer than a man's finger,
And thick enough to punch through multiple layers of heavy canvas that would laugh at regular needles.
These weren't delicate instruments for fancy embroidery. They were basically metal spears designed to stab through tough materials. Pirates would sharpen and maintain these tools constantly, knowing that a broken needle during an emergency could doom everyone. The thread pirates used was equally specialized and completely different from anything used for normal sewing projects. Regular sewing thread would snap instantly under the stress of sail repairs in windy conditions. Instead, pirates used thick, waxed twine made from hemp, flax, or other strong plant fibers. Some crews even braided their own thread from whatever materials they could find or salvage,
creating custom repair supplies that matched their specific needs and available resources perfectly.
Then there were the palms, fleece, leather handguards that protected pirates' palms and fingers,
while forcing heavy needles through resistant canvas that could shred unprotected hands to bloody messes.
These weren't optional accessories. Without proper palm protection, sailors would destroy their hands within minutes of starting serious repairs.
Smart pirates customized their palms with metal reinforcements and extra padding for brutal sewing work,
turning them into specialized tools that could handle hours of punishment that would cripple normal hands. Pirates also developed ingenious modifications to stolen or salvaged sailmaker equipment for their specific needs. They'd reinforce handles on sewing tools, add extra grip surfaces for wet conditions during storms,
and create custom jigs that held fabric steady while stitches were made in rolling seas.
Some crews built portable sewing stations that could be secured to the deck during repairs.
giving workers stable platforms even when ships pitched wildly in rough seas and dangerous weather.
The most valuable tools were often the simplest ones that could perform multiple functions. Sharp knives for cutting canvas, metal spikes for creating holes, and sturdy scissors for thick materials.
Pirates treated these basic tools like precious weapons because they knew that effective repairs depended on proper equipment.
But having the right tools was only half the battle against torn sails and death.
Pirates needed to master patching techniques that could turn torn sails into functioning power sources again.
Often using whatever materials they could scavenge from their floating homes and personal belongings.
The methods they developed were absolutely brilliant, combining practical engineering with desperate creativity.
The key to successful sail patching was understanding that repairs needed to be stronger than original canvas.
Tears usually happened at stress points, where fabric was already weakened by weather and use.
Those simple patches would just rip out again under pressure, making the problem worse than before.
Smart pirates learned to distribute repair loads across larger areas using overlapping patches and reinforcement stitching that spread forces through multiple layers of material instead of concentrating stress at single points.
Double and triple patching became standard practice for serious tears that threatened the entire sail.
Pirates would cut patches from spare canvas, then sew them over damaged areas using specific stitch patterns
That prevented stress concentration and distributed loads across the strongest parts of the repair.
The most effective technique involved creating patch sandwiches with damaged areas covered on both sides
With new material, then stitched together with thread that passed through all layers multiple times.
When spare canvas ran out, pirates got incredibly creative with alternative patching materials they could find.
Stolen clothing, particularly heavy coats and thick pants, could be cut up and sewn over sail tears. Leather from belts, boots, and equipment pouches made excellent patches for areas needing extra strength. Some crews even used animal hides from their food supplies, processing raw skin into usable repair materials. The stitching patterns pirates developed were works of art, disguised as emergency repairs. Cross-hatching, spiral stitching, and interlocking patterns distributed stress loads while preventing tears from spreading. These weren't random sewing attempts. They were carefully planned reinforcement systems requiring skill and experience.
Pirates learned to predict where future tears might develop and preemptively reinforce those vulnerable areas. Experienced crews could look at a sail and identify weak points that would fail under stress.
Then strengthen those spots before problems developed, saving hours of emergency repairs during critical moments.
The most successful patches often used combination techniques that layered different materials and stitching methods together.
A typical complex repair might involve leather reinforcement patches sewn with cross-hatch patterns, covered by canvas patches attached with spiral stitching, then finished with rope reinforcements
that distributed loads to multiple anchor points, creating repairs stronger than the original sail.
While tools and techniques were crucial, the human element made the real difference between success and deadly failure.
Pirates quickly learned to identify crew members who had natural talent for needlework and precise stitching. And these skilled seamsters became some of the most valuable people aboard any vessel. But finding them wasn't always obvious, and talent often hid in unexpected places. The best ship sewers weren't necessarily the people you'd expect to have delicate needlework skills.
Some of the toughest, most feared pirates turned out to have incredibly nimble fingers.
And an eye for precise stitching that could create repairs stronger than professional sailmakers.
Former tailors, sailmakers, and even embroiderers who'd been pressed into pirate service brought professional skills that proved invaluable during emergencies when lives depended on perfect needlework under impossible conditions. These men often found themselves treated better than fighters because their abilities could save everyone's lives. Smart captains would test crew members' sewing abilities during calm weather, identifying hidden talent before emergencies. Pirates who shied promise with needle and thread got extra practice time and access to the best tools. Some crews developed informal apprenticeship programs where experienced seamsters taught their skills to younger sailors,
ensuring that sewing knowledge wouldn't be lost if key people died or left the ship.
The social dynamics around sewing created some amusing situations aboard these traditionally masculine vessels. Tough pirates who could gut enemies without flinching would gather around expert sewers like students,
Watching carefully as complex stitching techniques were demonstrated by the ship's needlework masters.
Some of the most feared raiders secretly practiced their needlework during off-duty hours.
Knowing that sewing skills might prove more valuable than sword fighting when death threatened everyone.
Respect for talented seamsters was genuine and practical. They were life insurance policies for everyone aboard.
Crews that lost their best sewers during battles or accidents faced dramatically higher chances of death. Smart pirates learned to protect their needlework specialists as carefully as they guarded their navigators and doctors.
The fun part was how competitive sewing became among some crews during long voyages.
Pirates would challenge each other to speed stitching contests, accuracy tests, and patch durability competitions. Successful seamsters earned bragging rights, extra food rations, and sometimes even shares of treasure.
Some legendary pirates became famous as much for their sewing abilities as their fighting skills.
When proper materials ran out and desperate times called for desperate measures, pirates turned to disgusting alternatives. That would make modern people sick just thinking about them, but often meant survival versus death. Human hair became surprisingly valuable thread material when regular supplies were exhausted during long voyages.
Pirates would cut off their own hair, braid it into strong cord, then use it for emergency stitching.
The technique worked because human hair is naturally strong and flexible. Plus, it was always available.
Leather from boots, belts, and personal equipment got processed into patch material regularly during emergencies. Pirates would cut up their own footwear if it meant keeping sails functional and ships moving. Animal intestines from food supplies were processed into incredibly strong thread and patch material. This sounds revolting, but gut strings were superior to many plant-based threads in strength.
Some crews even used processed fish skins as patch material when canvas and leather were unavailable.
After months of emergency repairs using whatever materials could be found, pirate sails looked like nightmarish patchwork quilts. These Frankenstein monster sails were covered in patches of different colors, textures, and materials. But despite their horrifying appearance, these extensively repaired sails often functioned better than new ones. The layered patching created incredibly strong sail surfaces that could withstand punishment that would destroy fresh canvas.
Multiple patches distributed stress loads across many anchor points, preventing catastrophic tears.
Ships with monster sails were actually less likely to suffer complete sail failures during storms or battles. Pirates developed strange superstitions around their patchwork sails, believing each repair added protective magic. Some crews refused to replace extensively patched sails even when they could afford new canvas. The visual impact of monster sails became psychological weapons during pirate encounters with merchant vessels. Ships that spotted extensively patched sails knew they faced experienced, resourceful crews who'd survived multiple disasters. As we reflect on these incredible tales of survival, stitched together with desperation and skill, something profound emerges about what truly made pirates legendary beyond their fighting abilities.
The most successful captains and crews were masters of the tiny details that meant survival. Those humble needles and threads became the real weapons that won the most important battles.
The battles against death itself, fought one careful stitch at a time.
While other crews perished from problems they couldn't solve, smart pirates survived through needlework mastery. The irony is beautiful. These tough, dangerous men found their greatest challenges in delicate needlework. Sewing forced pirates to develop patience, precision, and attention to detail that served them beyond repairs.
The same steady hands that could thread needles in hurricane conditions could also navigate by stars and perform the countless small tasks that kept ships functioning and crews alive.
The threads that held their sails together, literally, held their lives together too. Every stitch represented a choice to keep fighting instead of giving up to death. Pirates who mastered these skills didn't just repair their sails, they repaired their chances of survival. In the end, legendary pirates understood that staying alive wasn't about being the toughest or most ruthless.
It was about being resourceful enough to turn problems into solutions under impossible conditions, and skilled enough to perform precise work when lives depended on every single stitch.
Those monster sails flapping in ocean winds weren't just repaired canvas. They were flags of victory, sewn together one careful stitch at a time by men whose greatest treasure was the knowledge that they could survive.